Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to invite Taavi Tammiste onto the podcast, who's the CTO and co-founder of a company called Fyma. And he's also a specialist in machine learning. But I wanted to learn more about the story behind the company that is on a mission to transform cameras into smart devices. In a nutshell, the cameras that you see in shops, car parks, streets, sport venues easily plug into Fyma, which is an artificial neural network. So imagine taking that camera feed and then allowing analysis to detect objects, people, and behaviour. It's something that normal cameras and sensors can't do. But the training data, over hundreds of thousands of images, are used to train AI. But here's the big thing for those people that are saying, hey Neil, this is drifting into creepy territory here. Fyma blurs the faces of all people. And they do that to avoid AI ever learning or training to detect and categorize human faces. So essentially, it means that Fyma AI cannot and does not look at faces to avoid infringing biometric data and avoids racial profiling too. So I wanted to learn more about this company and how it's trying to be the most ethical AI vision around. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Estonia, where Taavi is waiting to speak with us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Taavi Tammiste. I'm the co-founder and CTO of an AI company called Fyma. So my personal background is that I've been working with applied machine learning, applied AI for the last 8 years now, doing everything from natural language processing, so understanding or giving computers the ability to understand text, computer vision, so giving the computers the ability to understand objects, to, predicting time series data, so things like, simple stuff like weather, but even more complex stuff like understanding credit scores and, things like that. And now for the last roughly 2 years, I've been building, together with my co-founder, Karen, an AI startup called Fyma. And what we do is basically we enable our customers to connect any camera to our platform. And the platform has the ability to basically detect objects or give out valuable data for it. So to put it really simply, you connect the camera and you get data out of it. So we're kind of like a translation tool.
It's incredibly cool what you're doing there, and I'm looking forward to digging a little bit deeper into that. But before we do, obviously you're speaking to me in Estonia today, and there's a huge, vibrant tech scene there. I love what you guys are doing. But before we get there, can you tell me a little bit more about your origin story and where your passion for tech came from and what it was that put you on this path you're on today? Can you remember what lit that spark?
Yeah, so I think when I got started, I actually wanted to go and study something technological at the university, basically, because I've been always sort of tech-minded, so I always loved dealing with computers and stuff like that. But I didn't necessarily want to go to IT because my father was sort of like a head of a very big IT company at the time, and I wanted to do something separately, something differently. So I decided to go and study telecommunications engineering. So I actually have a master's degree in telecommunications engineering, but I was a really bad radio engineer because I think I only spent a year working as a radio engineer at Ericsson and then started working with all sorts of digital innovation. So everything and anything related to new services and things like that. And I got my first try at AI and machine learning while I was working at Tele2, which is a Swedish operator. And that's where I saw that it's possible to create absolutely amazing value from data you already have. So, for example, if you create an algorithm that can predict when your antennas will break, that's a huge advantage that you've just created with an algorithm. And when we did things like that, there was kind of no going back for me since. So I've been obsessed with data and obsessed with AI ever since. So I think I'm currently building my fourth data science team, and we've done everything from predicting allergy medicine demand, for example. So trying to understand based on people's Google search trends. So when they start looking for runny nose, red eye, stuff like that, how much allergy medicines should the company be producing and things like that. So I think it's been more sort of evolutional in the sense that there hasn't been this big aha moment for me, except, my first project. But yeah, that's how I got into this field, and I'm loving it ever since.
I love that. And of course, that path led you to Fyma, which, as you said at the very beginning, turns cameras into predictive sensors and unlocking the data living in your video streams and turning it into actionable insights, really. But can you set the scene and tell the listeners a little bit more about the kind of problems that you set out to solve for businesses with Fyma?
Yeah, I think in order to do that, we need to sort of take one step back on why we decided to build a platform like this. So actually, I ran my own AI consultancy company as well. So basically, selling AI as a service to various large companies. And one of the projects we did there was for the largest city here in Estonia, Tallinn city government. And what they wanted to understand was that, they wanted to become a more data-driven city and to make decisions based on data and all these good things. And what they had was that they didn't have a lot of data to do this. So they had road sensors, which are basically radar-based sensors that you put, on top of the road, and they just cover one lane. The tricky part around those is that one of those costs 3,500 euros each, and you have, if you want to outfit an entire intersection, that will cost like 50,000 euros per intersection. So it's not very, costly, a very interesting proposition. So, but they do have cameras on most of the intersections, and, being a consultancy company, we reached out and said, hey, we can build you an algorithm, and, we can detect these objects using cameras. The funny thing was that just from start to finish, when we started this project and when it ended, it took us 6 months to train the algorithm, to gather the data, to set up the infrastructure, to keep it running, and all these things. So it was a very time-consuming process. That was mainly due to the fact that AIs need to be trained. You need to, train them to look at the objects you want to detect. And this was a sort of a pattern that was coming through all of my projects, saying that it just took so much time to do it. And now that we've built this platform, you can basically do the same project in 20 seconds because everything has been pre-built and everything has been set up for you to do this. So we're kind of addressing a market hole there. So we're working with 3 types of customers right now. So urban analytics, city streets, commercial real estate. We're working with out-of-home advertising providers, so companies who have outdoor billboards. And we're also dabbling a little bit in the retail sector as well. But our main focus is outdoor analytics and out-of-home advertising. So how companies use us basically is that, imagine you have a camera, a CCTV camera. It doesn't really matter which one it is. It has to be network connected. So the feed needs to be accessible by our platform. They basically log into our website. They put the camera video stream in there. They define what they want to get out of this camera. So it's basically as simple as drawing lines and polygons on the camera video feed, which we call virtual sensors. So whenever an object crosses this line or polygon, we basically collect data on that. And there's many different things we can collect the data, which type of data we can collect. And then they press a button, everything goes live, basically. And we're also quite different in a way that we've actually built the platform focusing mainly on privacy. So from ground up, this means actually, so why we've done this is first and foremost is that we saw this as a big entry barrier in the beginning. So whenever everybody talks about camera analytics, Big Brother comes up and all these things. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to kind of make it impossible for the data that the platform sees to be used in a malicious way. And we've done this on 3 levels. So the first one is the software stack. So we don't actually keep any of the video data. It's kind of like a waterfall. It just passes through our platform and then gets destroyed. Only the analytics data gets kept. The second one is the second layer is our data labeling and AI training. So whenever our engineers are basically labeling data to feed into the AI to be learned, what we do is that we actually blur out all the faces beforehand. So any image that comes into even our engineers, in front of our engineers, already is anonymized and blurred out. Yeah. So what we do is that we train our algorithms to detect people from the neck down. What this means is that even if the algorithm looks at the live image, the algorithm itself has never seen a face. So the face pixels are exactly the same for it as the background pixels. So, road and stuff like that. So it's almost impossible to understand any identity because, the AI doesn't understand that. And our third sort of layer is our legislation. So everything around data protection contracts, we've been verified by local data protection authorities and all these types of things. So we really wanted to get a jump on making sure that our system is both accurate, but also doesn't infringe on anybody's privacy and, can't be used in a bad way. And this is a pretty big competitive edge that we have over our competitors as well.
It's so refreshing to hear that, because I think so many people listening will be nervous about the ethical concerns around pairing surveillance tech with AI and racial profiling, etc. So it's great to hear that it's a responsibility that you're taking seriously. Is that something that was very important to you from the very beginning?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's working with ethical AI is super important for me personally. I always say this. So when everybody asks me this inevitable question that, will AI take over the world? What I usually answer is that I'm not super worried about the technology taking over the world. I'm worried about the people who want to use the technology to take over the world. Because it's a tool like any other, right? Computers don't necessarily learn on their own yet, at least. I mean, most of the sort of applied machine learning applications or applied AI learning applications out there don't really learn by themselves. They might have, feedback loops built into them to improve the learning cycle and all these other things, but they're still being taught by data scientists, basically. So it's really important that, the company culture and as well as the technical limits are set so that you are sort of creating a tool that that delivers value, but can't be used in a bad way.
Love that. So essentially, we've got this AI platform that plugs into most retail, city, urban and CCTV cameras and transforms those standard cameras and the feeds into deep insights into objects, people and behaviours in real time, but ethically. And I love what you're doing there. But just to bring to life everything that we're talking about, do you have any use cases that you can share? I appreciate you might not be able to mention a brand name as such, but just to bring to life everything that it can offer.
Yeah, the cool part around this is that we've actually, so because the platform is so flexible, our customers have used it for ways that we didn't actually even imagine. Mm-hmm. So we actually work with a large shopping center who basically had a food court, and this was during the first wave of COVID. And they were, losing a lot of people because people weren't going outside that much. So what they actually did was they had a huge food court and they had a couple of cameras pointed at the food court. So what they did was they actually draw a line or a polygon around the food court, and they measured if 500 people walk into the food court, a cleaning team got sent into it because, it probably needed cleaning. And this was something really cool because we had never actually thought of using this technology in that way. But it basically gave them a tool to sort of help keep things sanitary and help, optimize their cleaning processes. But more the common ways that it gets used is, so for example, road traffic. So what our system allows us to do is basically, predict how road traffic will look like, for example, in large events. And there we can see that how people actually move before and after the football matches. And this is really cool because what happens is that people come in very gradually, but they all leave at once at a big bang. So this actually allows the stadium controllers to manage how people move, shut down streets, do all these other things. But yeah, even the simplest form is basically outdoor billboard pricing. So for example, we can tell you how many people are walking past the billboard, and you can price it based on that. But even more so, we can actually tell you how many men, how many women, how many adults, how many children are walking past the billboard as well, without doing facial recognition. So there's a huge sort of demographics information value there that can be used in various different ways.
And it's those different ways that I think are quite exciting, because one of the things that you guys pride yourself on is focusing on AI learning in new ways and focusing on other things from movements, weather, gender, age, and so much more. They're all without facial recognition, which again is so refreshing. But can you expand on that, on some of those different areas that you're exploring?
But what we can do is that one of the cool things about AI is combining various different data sources together. You mentioned weather, right? So one thing you can do is if you collect enough data, if you have cameras that are working 24/7, and you're gathering like a year's worth of data in a couple of locations, you can start correlating this data together with other data, such as weather data, for example. And this can be used to forecast movement in other locations. For example, a restaurant, for example. If you have a restaurant that is covered by Fyma, and you can see that, during dry days, you have this much people, during wet days, you have this much people, you can start predicting your output, and you can start optimizing your workflows based on how many servers do you need, and how many people might come in, how to stock your food supplies. So this is actually really valuable data. But Fyma doesn't necessarily give you the end all on what you need to do. So we give you the information. So this is what we predict is going to happen in terms of movement. But you still need to make the decision based on your business on what are you going to do with that data, right? And this varies, so much from customer to customer.
I also read that there's a great use case around the Dutch Grand Prix. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this was a really, really cool one. And, we do so many stuff, you forget about these things, basically. But this was a really cool one in a sense that it kind of proved our use case on that any camera can be connected to Fyma. So this was a drone that didn't have any internet connectivity, anything. It was a stationary drone, meaning it had a cable attached to it when it was flying. And we connected it to Fyma like in 15 minutes, and then started flying and, measuring how people walked from the Dutch Grand Prix to the railway station. And I think their limits were like 500 people per minute. So then there were queues forming and stuff like that. And we measured 400, and, we looked across the road and there were no queues. So we kind of validated our use case. And
for any business that's looking to invest in new technology, right now it's all about ROI. What's in it for me? What business benefits does it bring to me? Do you have any examples of the kind of business benefits and ROI that businesses are getting from unlocking this data that you're providing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest sort of ROI implementation that we can sort of say is around advertising. And that's why I'm saying this, because it's the easiest to kind of explain, and it's also the quickest. Because if we're talking about movement analytics on let's say an urban development area somewhere, that ROI doesn't come in next month or in 6 months' time even. It can come over a year, because you need to do different types of planning changes, change streets, make things better for the people that live in this area. So those are kind of long-term ROI goals that are more difficult to measure. But if we're talking about outdoor advertising, that's a pretty simple one. So when before Fyma you were blind, you didn't know how many people walked past your billboards. Now you do, basically, and you can price it based on that. Even with the new wave of digital billboards that have the capability to show you different ads in different times of the day, you can now start targeting the ads based on the gender split of individuals that are walking around in this specific area, for example. And that's a huge, huge win. I mean, think of it like this. Everybody's used to running Google Analytics on their website. So they know exactly, how people are behaving on their website. Nobody is actually looking at the physical space and trying to do the same. So that's something that we're trying to do, trying to show you where people go, what they do, how they interact with the environment. And that's actually that's the next step that we're taking with Fyma as well, is going from just object detection and gender detection towards more behavior detection. So understanding, first and foremost, really simple things like, are people walking, running, or falling down? But then to a more complex level on, are they touching any specific product? Do they use any specific bench in any specific area, and all these types of things.
A quick time out from the interview to mention Hirect, the sponsors of the Tech Talks Daily podcast this month. So recruiters, are you or your business spending too long in your email and waiting for responses? Did you know that with HireAct, you can skip the headache of traditional hiring? You can view resumes, exchange contact info and interview candidates in seconds. You can also get curated candidate recommendations that fit your job requirements. You can chat directly with your ideal candidates, accelerate your hiring process 10 times faster than those painful traditional ways. And best of all, it's a totally free download from the Apple and Google Play Store. So download HireAct from the Apple or Google Play Store, give it a try, and let me know what you think. But now, back to today's interview. And I'm curious, what are your biggest challenges when trying to, let's say, modernise and improve in-store shopping and advertising in a way that e-commerce is so strongly data-driven right at the moment in time where 50 shops a day are closing on high streets and because COVID sent shoppers online? Or do you see that as an opportunity as the shops are opening back up?
I think, so there are a lot of challenges, but I think COVID has been a bit of a opportunity for us more than a major challenge. Why is that actually sort of physical retails have understood that they need data, that they can't live without it. And the data that they have right now is doesn't really have the ability to cope with large changes. So it can, so if you have like laser-based door counters, they can sort of show you a change of, 100 people a day or something like that. But if you lose like 6,000 visitors per day, that data might not come out actually, because, if you have multiple people walking through the laser sensor at once, it counts them as one person basically. And another thing is that retailers have been historically have been looking at entries and exits, right? And that's an important thing to measure. But at the same time, now because COVID has affected people's purchasing decisions so much, people are buying in completely different ways. So now it's even more important to understand if a person enters a store, where do they go? What do they do? Maybe I completely need to change my store, or maybe I completely need to change my building, or maybe I completely need to, COVID also actually increased the number of bicycles on the road by, in some of our areas by more than 20%. So maybe you need to start looking at more bike-friendly roads or things like that. So because COVID had such a big impact on society itself, it also brought out the need for data, which we can basically deliver.
Fantastic. So many opportunities there. It's been an exciting time for you as well. I'm curious, what's next for Fyma? Where do you go from here? Is there anything you can share about the road ahead and what excites you?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we're working on right now that are a little bit secret that I will talk about right now as well. So one of the things that I mentioned before is behavior detection. So this is really, really, really cool in a sense that we're now looking at what objects do just instead of just detecting them. The second thing is that we're actually going to make the service available for users that don't have video cameras as well. So right now, I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is something that we mentioned, is that there is currently a huge chip shortage in the world. And most customers that we talk to actually have cameras, but if you have a new development or something and you want to set up cameras, if you order a camera, in March, it might come in February because the delays are so long. So what we're building right now is basically a new functionality where you can take a video with your smartphone, upload it to our website, and you can actually get detections and everything out from it as well. So you don't need to have a camera installed to use Fyma, basically. And this is going to be something that we'll be launching within the next 2 months. And as far as we can tell, nothing like this exists out there at the moment as well. So there is possibility to do object detection on images, but not necessarily videos as simply as just drag and dropping and getting data out from it.
Intrigued. It sounds like we're going to have to get you back on in 2022, which is just a few months away. I can't believe how quickly this year's gone. But a question I always like to ask my guests is, especially when we've come full circle in an interview where we've started with your origin story, what put you on this path, is now, what was the soundtrack to that story? Is there a song or piece of music and a story behind that song or piece of music that helps you get your head in the zone or has just inspired you along the way? And if you can share that song with us today, we'll add it to our Spotify playlist. But how does that sound? Is there a song that means anything to you?
Yeah, so I listen to a lot of music. I mean, whenever I'm working, I have my headphones on and I listen to a lot of music, and most of it is pretty modern, and I listen to lots of things. But every time I go on stage, before that, I usually listen to Steve Harley and Cockney Rebels' Make Me Smile. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yes, brilliant song.
It's an old one. But that kind of really gets me pumped and going. So that's probably the song that I would say is something that has affected my life quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, an oldie but a goodie. I saw him in concert about 5 years ago. I think I had to sit through about a 2-hour concert to get to that song, but it was worth it.
I'm really jealous about that.
But before I let you go, for anyone listening who wants to find out more information about Fyma or anything we've talked about today, or contact your team, what's the best way of doing that?
I think the best way is our website. So everything is up there. All of our contacts are up there. It's pretty easy to get in touch. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So if anybody wants to get in touch, I usually, take the invites. So yeah, that's, I think, the best way to do that.
Cool. Well, I love what you're doing here, and the ROI of unlocking all this data that people have, businesses for the most part have actually got anyway, just by turning cameras into predictive sensors and unlocking the data living in those video streams. Incredibly cool. But what's even more cool is how you're doing all this without facial recognition and blurring those faces out and just removing that concern from the equation straight away. Incredibly cool. I'd love to get you on next year, see how this is evolving, but more than anything, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
The big thing that stands out to me is that Fyma and its more ethical AI is trained not to recognise faces ever. And in the training and deployment stages of AI, there's no risk to facial or racial profiling. And Fyma does not store any camera feed data, only the metadata. And I think we've all heard the horror stories around AI and facial recognition and the dystopia we're heading to. But here we have a company doing everything right, building an ethical solution. But we don't see that in the headlines anywhere. We only see those scary articles of robots taking over the world with a Terminator image in there. But this is a great story, and although bad news sells, I think it's time that we made good news sell. So I'd love to hear more about everybody's thought on this and the great work that they're doing in this more ethical solution. So please keep your thoughts coming in, questions, insights, opinions, whatever it might be. Email me at techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So keep those messages coming in, and I'll return again tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.